Well, after my last video on Ori and the Blind Forest, I'd hoped to be uploading a complete review of the sequel, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, right about now. But it was not to be. Like a lot of people, apparently, I had some rather serious technical issues with the new game. It crashed occasionally, but more significant were the audio issues. You know that sound you get sometimes just before a game crashes completely, a kind of mechanical juddering that sounds like the game audio is grinding to a sudden halt? Well, I was getting that every 10 seconds or so while playing Will of the Wisps, only without the crashing. Except, like I said, it did crash occasionally, but when it didn't make the crashing sound I just described. Does that count as irony, or is it just Alanis Morissette-style irony? Anyway, in a game like that, with such an expressive and atmospheric soundtrack, this audio issue rendered the game almost unplayable. For whatever reason, recording footage with OBS greatly exacerbated the problem, and OBS itself also crashed many times, taking all the footage with it. So yeah, I definitely wasn't going to be recording much gameplay, so doing a proper review became impossible. And honestly, that may not be such a bad thing. I'm not exactly a YouTube big shot, I don't get advanced review copies, although that'll always be the dream. By which I mean, it'll always be a dream. Any review I did would be at least a week late and kind of irrelevant. Not that I'm really going for relevance, as you may have noticed if you've watched any of my videos. In any case, after a few patches, Ori and the Will of the Wisps now seems to be running fine, 99% of the time. Every now and then I do still hear a tiny bit of audio distortion, and honestly it is still pretty jarring when it happens, but it's such an amazing game that I'm willing to turn a blind eye, or I guess a deaf ear. So I might as well quickly go over my experiences with the game, a kind of mini review if you will. Every minor quibble I had with the Blind Forest has been improved on in Will of the Wisps. The open world is more detailed, more tightly packed with points of interest, and more intricately interwoven. The combat is much more dynamic and interesting, and Ori has more tools at his disposal when engaging enemies. That said, the combat is still not quite as interesting or well designed as the platforming. Unlike the first game, which had only a few friendly beings, Ori can now meet a whole host of outlandish characters, from nimble cat-like creatures to giant friendly toads. This game just has a whole lot more going on: side quests, a hub area where you can choose what is constructed next, a variety of new environmental elements to interact with. The first game was rather minimalist in a lot of ways, but this sequel kind of isn't. And that's, well, it's fine, it's good to have a more populated and dynamic world to explore, but I can't help feeling that something has been lost, that there's a certain elegance and simplicity to the first game that's missing here. Of course, I criticised the first game for being a tad too simple, so obviously I'm just a dithering idiot who doesn't know what he wants. And anyway, it's safe to say that if something has been lost, a lot more has been gained. The world is even more gorgeous now. The fundamental aesthetics, including the stunning use of colour that was the visual highlight of the first game, remain pretty much the same, but the level of detail has significantly increased. The vibrant parts of the forest seem more teeming with life, the dark and dangerous areas seem more oppressively threatening. The character models have been subtly but significantly improved, and even more so than before, Ori and his friends seem like living, breathing inhabitants of their beautiful world. Plus, there's just more movement everywhere. From the mountains and ruins and dark caverns in the far background up to the fern fronds and tufts of grass right in front of the camera, everything just seems more alive. Indeed, more alive may be the best way to describe the game. I won't go into it too much more for the moment, but suffice it to say, if you have any interest in this sort of game, I highly recommend picking it up. It's only $40 Australian, which makes it a bargain in my book. Anyway, onto the game that's the main topic of this video, Apocalipsis. There are a couple of reasons why I wanted to take a look at it now. The first is, well, with a name like Apocalipsis, and considering some of the themes, it's depressingly fitting for the times we're living through out here in the real world. And the second reason, that's something I'll discuss later. So, this is Apocalipsis. It's a point-and-click adventure game with a rather striking visual style, reminiscent of medieval woodcuts. It's also a very short game, so I might as well get straight into it. It's the classic tale. Harry's girlfriend has been drowned as a witch, so of course the first thing the bereaved young man does is raise her dead body from the water, take her broomstick and use it to impale the head of a nearby rat. Well, I guess we all react to grief differently. He waves his new broom rat at a black cat. I mean, it sounds like a cat, but I honestly thought it was a monkey of some sort at first. Who then leads him to a mysterious shack filled with arcane implements and accessories. There really isn't much to the actual gameplay. Move the mouse, click on things, that's it. And that would be fine. What else do you really need in a point-and-click adventure? Well, for one thing, you'd ideally have puzzles that require some genuine thought, but there aren't many of them here. The game is a linear sequence of small environments, and in 90% of them the process required to get through them is this. Mouse over everything to find the things you can interact with, pick up the items that can be picked up, then put those items in the right place. Sometimes it's obvious what you have to do. These candles, for instance, clearly need to form a pentagram. Sometimes, though, it's not obvious at all. For instance, what even is this thing I've picked up? Some sort of sack with a hole in it? And this other weird contraption. I guess it might be some sort of wind instrument, like a horn. So you put the horn in this hole and the bag on this pipe thing. Not because there's any indication that's what you should do, or because it makes any logical sense. I mean, I have no idea what the pipe and the hole above it are even supposed to be at this point. No, you put them there because you only have a few items in your inventory and only a few places where they can possibly be used, so it only takes 30 seconds of trial and error to get them where they're supposed to be. And then you place the skulls in the right places, and I get that they match the skulls above them, so I guess that counts as a clue. But I have zero idea why those two skulls, and only those two skulls, need to be there. But for whatever reason, once they're in place, you can use the bag to produce a sequence of 4 notes, which you need to replicate on the keyboard around the front. And now, in retrospect, I can at least make a guess at what the game was getting at, that the bag on the pipe is kind of like, well, bagpipes, and the sound comes through the horn. But that certainly wasn't what I was thinking of when I was randomly clicking on things. Anyway, this skull organ bagpipe thing is one of the most obtuse puzzles in the game, but that actually comes a fair bit later. There's a whole heap of rather surreal events to randomly click your way through first. But there are some more comprehensible puzzles along the way. This valve puzzle, for instance, has a pretty clear goal. Connect the pipes so the water can flow from the top left to the bottom right. But either it's too easy or I'm incredibly lucky because I got it almost immediately, when I was still randomly turning things in order to understand what they did. The next area contains possibly the most coherent and logical puzzle of all those in the game. At the very least, it's relatively clear what you need to do. Get the keys from the cheerful chap in the black hood. And hey, he's taking regular hits from that bottle right there, and there's poison in the back room, so, well, a natural solution presents itself. And how do you get the poison? Do you even have to ask? Obviously, you take the tongues from the dead bodies in the Iron Maidens and use the symbols on them to crack the code that opens the crate of poison, which has clearly been fitted with a common 16th century torture victim tongue lock. You know, like you would have seen in all those historical dramas. And actually, I don't have the faintest idea what the correct set of symbols is or how we're supposed to arrive at it, but I do know that this code is easily brute forceable. So that's what I do. But seriously, what's the logic behind this? There's a symbol on the wall here, is that a clue? I honestly don't know, and I don't really care. But it's pretty simple stuff from there. Get the key, open the lock, use the iron ball on the hook to open the gate, get the meat, use the meat to distract the dog. Hooray! And then we're on the battlements, operating a siege weapon for some reason. Why are we doing this? We're on a quest to resurrect our dead beloved. Why are we engaging in a little warfare? Actually, why are we doing anything in this game? I get the first section with the pentagram of candles and the magic spells. That's something a desperate dude might do. But what's his motivation for the rest of this journey? Yeah, I don't know why I'd expect that to make sense. Nothing else does. The game's store page claims the world and story are based on the Book of Revelations and Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, so maybe all this stuff is in there somewhere. Before long, you find your path blocked by an 8-headed bird and a giant fish. And ridiculous as that might sound, I do have to give the game some credit for its artwork, specifically some of the genuinely grotesque imagery it creates. It can be quite compelling in a bleak and often disgusting way. I can't say the same about the main character, though. Maybe they were going for bleakness with his facial expression, but to me he just looks like a bored, pouting teenager. The next scene too is surreal and intriguingly nightmarish, with its skeletal bishop and lurking sea monster. And what do you need to do here? It's simple, really. Use the anvil to forge a sword to sever the corpse's arm, which the sea monster eats, causing it to regurgitate a live owl, which then itself regurgitates an insect or something, which the rat goes to eat, thus allowing access to the coins, which you give to the captain, so he'll take you to the next step along your journey. Whew. It sounds like one of those ridiculously difficult and illogical puzzles from the point-and-click games of the past, like the Babel fish in Hitchhiker's Guide, or the duck puzzle from Longest Journey, but it's nowhere near as frustrating as those were, partially because there are so few objects to interact with, but also because once you've put an item where it needs to go, or interacted with it when you need to, that's it, the item becomes inactive, so you know you've solved a part of the puzzle. And honestly, that's probably preferable to the tedious trial and error required in those older games, but it still really doesn't make for interesting gameplay. But up next, oh god. Everything else in this game can be solved fairly quickly by random clicking, but not this puzzle. I spent well over half an hour on this ship trying to figure it out, and ended up having to watch a walkthrough on YouTube to get the answer, and I still have absolutely zero idea how you're supposed to arrive at it. Maybe I'm an idiot. Well, there's no maybe about it, but I'd like to think I could at least understand the solution to a puzzle once it's been given to me. But I can't. I just can't. If you can figure it out, let me know in the comments. Obviously you need to input the right sequence of symbols on this device, and there's a telescope that shows you a diagram that also has a bunch of symbols on it. Plus, once you scrub the deck, you find another diagram that matches one of the constellations in the sky. But despite all these clues, I remain clueless. I can't make any sense of it. Not all the symbols on the telescope match the symbols you can select from, and the bottom row of symbols are mirrored vertically. Does that mean something? Is the telescope diagram supposed to be a sequence? It kind of looks like the diagram on the deck if it was missing one node. Does that mean anything? I still don't know, and possibly I never will. Maybe the solution here is so ingenious, so incredibly inventive, that if my feeble brain could even conceive of it, I'd be willing to overlook the other flaws of this game and call it a work of staggering genius. But I can't, so I won't. Anyway, here's the solution. I still have no idea what the logic behind it is. Not long after that, the ship sinks and you're presented with a rather feeble attempt at an action sequence. Swim left and right to avoid the tentacle and the falling debris. It's not fun, it's not interesting, it's a baffling inclusion in a game like this. Not as baffling as that damn star puzzle though. The game actually picks up a bit after that though. Almost all the puzzles are still of the put random things in random places category, but at least they make a modicum of sense. Here for example, you need to place weights in the right combination to make the bridge above connect with the cliff. And this scene, with an emaciated cow and a bizarre troll-like creature with its head on its chest, is another good example of the grotesque artwork at its best. And actually the music too is pretty good. It's very simple, but it's atmospheric and it suits the overall aesthetic. Eventually you find yourself in the underworld, where you face a few more mediocre puzzles, including that obtuse skull organ bagpipe one I showed you before, and oh man, I really hate these sliding puzzles. I've never learned how to do them. I may be stuck here a while. Oh, I got it almost immediately. Oh, hooray. And now we've arrived at very nearly the last puzzle. You have to reassemble this winged skeleton, then configure these pipes so that they drain sand from your hourglass into that of your deceased lover. This is the sort of puzzle that I can actually get some slight enjoyment from, and it's implemented well enough here. Except, I swear that should work. Isn't that connected? Definitely looks like it should be. but nothing's happening. I mess around for a while, look for other solutions, but still nothing works. And I can't actually exit this screen. Is it a bug? Have I broken the game? I try reloading my last save, quitting the game entirely and coming back, but still nothing. Eventually I have to go back to the walkthrough I watched before, and it confirms that yes, I do indeed have the correct solution. So why isn't it working? The only difference I can see is that in the walkthrough the player puts Harry's hourglass into its slot before reassembling the winged skeleton, whereas I did it the other way round. So I go back into the game and try it the way the walkthrough did it. It works. Why though? What possible difference could it make? Once again I'm baffled. I'm willing to chalk this one up to a bug though, rather than poor design. I'm not sure if that's a point in the game's favour. And this is the final puzzle. You need to reconstruct this star pattern, spin the sections of this other star pattern until it's all in the right place, collect a bunch of fruit or something, and enter the magic word into this device. This too is not brute forceable, but fortunately this time the solution isn't too difficult, as you need a 9-letter word and there's one on the wheel to the left there. I figured that much out before it even got highlighted in red, which I believe makes me a mega genius. So you drink the magic potion, smash the mirror, and I have no idea why you need to do those things. You've already resurrected your beloved with that buggy pipe puzzle in the last room, but whatever. And that's the game completed. You see Harry and, she does actually have a name, I just forget what it is, reclining peacefully, and then the credits roll. But that's the good ending. Apparently there's a bad ending, which I didn't get because I collected the 7 flowers along the way, which is tough not to do because you'll be scanning every screen for objects to click on anyway. In the bad ending, you see Harry alone, lying dead on the floor next to the pentagram. And honestly, I think I prefer that ending. It suggests that Harry was killed trying to cast the spell at the start of the game, and everything after that has been the surreal hallucination of his dying mind. That would actually explain why the whole thing is so nonsensical. In any case though, that's the game done. Was it a good game? Well, no, I can't really say that it was. I do like the art style, the music was effective, and there was a bleak but compelling oppressiveness to the overall atmosphere. But that's not enough to make a good game. In fact, it's not enough to make a game at all, it's just enough to make a melancholy cartoon. And that's kind of what this feels like, a cartoon made by talented artists, but then converted into a game by people who perhaps didn't have such a good eye for game design as they do for visual design. So it's not a good game, but it's not, completely abysmal. Apart from the odd bug and the occasional unsolvable puzzle, which I'm willing to accept may be my fault, it is a functional game, which I know is damning with the faintest possible praise. With the aforementioned exceptions, it wasn't frustrating, it wasn't an unpleasant experience, it just wasn't a very good one. So, do I recommend that you play Apocalipsis? No. Do I regret playing it myself? Not at all. But that lack of regret comes from one specific reason, the second of the 2 reasons I mentioned at the start. The thing is, I didn't pay for this game, not really. If I had spent money on Apocalipsis, even the low price of $10 that it currently sells for, I would have considered it money poorly spent, and then I might have regretted paying for it. But no, I didn't pay for it because I subscribe to Xbox Game Pass on PC, and that's what I want to talk about next. Video game subscription services like Xbox Game Pass and Origin Access are kind of a prickly subject amongst gamers. A lot of people just flat out hate them, and wouldn't subscribe to one until hell froze over, then thawed out, then froze over again while Satan sang a variety of Broadway show tunes. And I understand that, these people have their reasons, and they're mostly valid. I think for most people who don't even like the idea of gaming subscription services, it comes down to the question of ownership. Basically, people like to own games, and hey, I'm one of those people, no doubt. If I was rich, one of the first things I'd do is start working on a truly awe-inspiring game collection, from the retroest of retro to the bleeding edge of tomorrow. I dream of rooms lined with shelves, each shelf filled with a meticulously ordered range of games from every nation and for every system imaginable. But I'm not rich. In fact, I'm only a step or 2 away from swapping rambling on YouTube for ranting on a park bench somewhere. Which actually might get me more viewers now I think of it. Even in the digital world, people still want to be able to claim ownership over their games. Of course, that ownership is more tenuous. Most end-user license agreements stipulate that you don't really own much of anything. And Steam is not immortal. There may come a day when my 1200-strong library of games stops being accessible. But with a subscription service, there's no question of ownership at all. You know you're just paying a fee for temporary access to the library of games. And put like that, it seems less appealing. But surely the appeal rests on the quality of the library and the amount of the fee? Maybe it's because some of my most formative gaming years took place in a world where it was common practice to go to the video store and hire a single game for a week at a cost that ate up most, if not all, of my pocket money. But when Microsoft tells me I can pay $5 to get access to a whole bunch of games I genuinely want to play for a whole month, that seems like a really good deal to me. In fact, it seems like a deal that's too good to ignore. And when I say games I genuinely want to play, well, let me run down the list, sorted in alphabetical order. A Plague Tale: Innocence? Actually, that'd be a rather depressingly relevant game to do a video on. Ape Out, Bloodstained: Ritual of the Night, Enter the Gungeon, Crosscode, Hollow Knight, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Indivisible, My Time at Portia, if that's how you pronounce that. And they're just the ones from the first half of the alphabet that I personally particularly want to play that I don't already own. I'm not including stuff like the amazingly brilliant Ori games, which obviously I've already played, or stuff like the Gears of War series or the Halo Master Chief Collection, which are huge games that I personally don't care all that much about. I'm aware I'm at risk of sounding like a shill for Microsoft or some deranged fanboy. I'm not. I have no strong feelings about Microsoft or any tech corporation or game publisher. I haven't owned an Xbox since the first one. But $5 a month for all those games, I think you'd have to have a pretty serious grudge against Microsoft or the concept of subscription services in general to maintain it's not a pretty good investment. Speaking of corporations that I don't have a strong opinion on, but which other people sure as hell do, I also subscribe to EA's Origin Access. And I imagine that if I had a subscriber base, I would have just lost a significant chunk of it. People don't like EA. I get that. Again, the reasons are mostly valid. And on the whole, I don't think Origin Access is as good a deal as Xbox Game Pass, but it does have the Battlefield series, which I still think is the best multiplayer shooter, with the possible exception of Titanfall, which is also on Origin Access. Plus it's got Need for Speed and last year's FIFA and Madden if you're into that sort of thing, which I am, occasionally. Oh, and it's got Anthem, which is good, because I really wanted to see if it was the train wreck people were calling it, and there was no way I was going to pay money for it. But let's bring it back to Apocalipsis. It's not a great game, but I only lost time by playing it, not money. And that's a good thing for someone as time-rich and cash-poor as myself, so I don't regret playing it. But I probably wouldn't have ever played it if it wasn't for one other factor, something which is another key element when weighing the relative merits of subscription services. See, the first time I became aware of Apocalipsis was when a notification popped up in the Game Pass app with a list of games that were soon to leave the catalogue of freely accessible games. This is something that happens relatively frequently. Games are added, games are removed. So even if you keep paying that monthly fee, it's possible that your favourite game may become unplayable. It should be noted, incidentally, that this is not the case with Origin Access, which apparently doesn't remove games, except sometimes when there's licensing issues. This is irritating at best and massively annoying at worst, and adds credibility to those who rage against the fact it's increasingly rare to actually own games. But does it really detract from the fundamental appeal of the subscription model? It's not as if the removed games have been wiped from the face of the earth. If you really like them, you can still buy them like any other digital game, and you won't lose any progress. And there is kind of an upside. I have access to a lot of games, but I don't have access to a similar quantity of motivation. There are games that have been in my backlog for longer than life has existed on this planet, and seeing that a game is about to leave Game Pass may be the kick in the arse I need to actually play it. Operencia, The Stolen Sun is next up on the chopping block. It looks like it might be a decent dungeon crawler, so maybe I'll give it a go. I'm not trying to change anyone's mind here, I'm just offering my perspective. And there are valid arguments to be made that while something like Game Pass represents good value at the moment, subscription services may change the gaming industry in ways that aren't so consumer friendly. I'm not sure about that though. I just see it as one more form of digital distribution in an increasingly wide open market. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm off to play some more Ori and the Will of the Wisps. And man, do I hate pronouncing that last word. And you can play it too, for a month at least, if you're willing to pop down $5. Or, just buy the game outright and play it for as long as you want. It's definitely worth it. Until next time though, get off my lawn.